Thank you for subscribing. Please support the movie I was camera operator on, Hallowed Be Thy Name. The link is down below. Subscribe to this channel. Thank you for tuning in. Follow me on Luima.raw. And now let's talk about camera moves. The difference between the art of still photography and motion pictures is just that, motion or movement. When we're shooting actors, we're not only listening to them speak, we're also seeing how they move, their body language, and how the camera is moving through the space and through the set. Camera moves are the principal complement to storytelling. If there was no camera moves or no camera movement at all, we might as well be reading or listening to the story. Camera moves are divided in 6 different categories: pan, tilt, roll, dolly, truck, and boom. There are 3 of these that are basically the camera staying in its same axis and moving around it. These are the pan, tilt, and roll. Panning is when you move the camera left to right. Tilting is when the camera is moving up or down. And rolling is when the camera is moving from side to side, like rolling a wheel. The other 3 moves are when the camera does not stay in its axis and it moves somewhere else in space. So dolly is when the camera goes in or out. Truck is when the camera goes left or right. Booming is when the camera goes up or down like an elevator would. It all gets really interesting when you start combining these shots to tell your story. You don't have to only pan or only tilt on a shot. You can combine a pan, a tilt, and then becomes a dolly in. Now, why is it important to know what these types of moves are called? Just like before in the shot structure, it is important to have very clear communication between the creative heads of every department. You can't just go and tell your director, let's dolly up and then tilt right as the character is moving. No. That makes no sense. You can't just throw words and just expect somebody to understand. That's why these 6 moves, if you tell them to somebody, they know exactly how the camera is supposed to move and where. But now comes the second part of movement. We know where to move the camera. But how do we move the camera where we want it to go? Let's begin talking about static movement, and that means putting the camera on a tripod. Basically, when you're on a tripod, you're only permitted to do 2 moves on the camera, which is panning and tilting. You can roll on a tripod technically, but then you require another rig on top of the tripod in order to do that. But panning and tilting is basically the most you can do with a tripod. If you want to move your camera dolly in or out, or truck it left to right, then you'd have to move the whole camera to what they call a dolly. There's a million types of dollies. Not a million, there's a couple hundred maybe, or less. There's maybe a dozen type of dollies that will let you move your camera in very different ways. There's some very simple dollies called doorway dollies, and you can move your camera dolly in and out, truck left and right. Then there's other types of dollies like a Chapman dolly, a Panther dolly that have a hydraulic arm in them, and then it will let you boom your camera up and down as well as all the other movements I just described. It's very nice to have a good dolly on set. You can also have what is called a jib in order to boom up and down. A jib is a very long arm with a counterweight on the back. The camera goes on the other end, and you can push it down and the camera goes up, and push it up and the camera goes down. It's like a seesaw. Then there's the bigger brother of the jib, what is called a crane. A jib will let you go pretty high, maybe a couple tens of feet high, but a crane can let you go a couple 100 feet high, maybe, a couple stories high if you're trying to get a shot like that. Next, we have what they call stabilizers. Stabilizers are pretty popular nowadays, but one type of stabilizer is the most popular, which is the 3-axis stabilizer. These are motorized gimbals, which means that you put the camera on it and there's little motors that balance it on the pan, tilt, and roll axis. That means you can move your camera and it will stay like in the same spot without moving around with everything you're doing. So you can dolly in, out, truck left, right, and the camera stays very level and balanced with the horizon, which is pretty cool and pretty affordable too. The next type of stabilizer is the balanced gimbal, which is commonly known as the Steadicam. The Steadicam has no motors on it. It's just an act of balancing the camera on top and some weights and a screen on the bottom. When you manage to balance the contraption with the camera and the weights, then your objective as the operator is to keep it level with the horizon. These stabilizers let you do every type of shot you need to do on the camera with their own limitations, but basically it's like free flying the camera around. A Steadicam operator has a very difficult job when he's operating on a Steadicam. A gimbal does most of the work for you and is suitable for lighter cameras, but when you're working with very heavy rigs, then a Steadicam will probably be the better choice at this moment in time. And then finally, the last type of equipment is no equipment at all, or what they call handheld. Handheld is when the operator or somebody grabs the camera on their hand and goes around with it. Basically, it's when the camera is on the person, so it could be on their leg, it could be on their shoulder, it could be right here on their arms. It's been done since forever in cinema. It gives a raw emotion, you know, you follow the character, it feels like you're actually in the scene with them. Drones and other type of rigs, maybe underwater rigs, are a different type of cinematography. Drones in particular are what they call aerial cinematography. That's a very big topic I might not want to go into a lot right now. Don't be afraid to move your camera. Don't just put the camera out there and put it on a tripod and leave it static. You're not shooting a soccer practice, you're shooting an actual movie, and movies want you to move around with them. Thank you for tuning in this video. I have something cool for you next week, a little bit more complicated than this one. I'm gonna talk about lenses next week. I feel like that's gonna be a very, very big video, so stay tuned. At Rima.raw on Instagram, check out my reel on Vimeo, check out the movie I was camera operator on, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much.